Good evening. My name is Rod Perry, and I'll be hosting the Sumas Community Memory Talk with our special guest, Mr. Herb Hatch. Herb grew up in the Clearbrook area, went to the Clearbrook school, and many of his relatives are buried at Lakeside Cemetery. And it is in that regard that I was able to contact Herb as I'm a cemetery commissioner at Lakeside Cemetery, and it was there was a discrepancy in the records, and it involved David Hatch. There were 2 death dates. Now it's pretty hard to have 2 death dates, so I contacted Herb, and we got a little more information. And so David was an uncle of yours, correct?
Yes, he was.
And he was killed out here near Sumas somewhere. Or when I talked to you, you thought maybe at the farm?
It was on the Rock Road.
Yes, I went to the archives, the Washington State Archives, the Northwest section, and I got an article about David Hatch. Let's hope this works. Well, we got a plan. Okay, and from the coroner's register, it said David was killed. Can't really read that too well. He was killed in a blast out a quarter mile east of Sumas, and that was in 1904, and it was a Saturday. And Herb had told me before that he had been killed by a stump. They were blown stumps. And go ahead and tell what you thought it was.
Well, everybody thought that he was killed by this stump, but we found out later that it was a rock that hit him in the head. The sun was shining in his eyes and he couldn't see it. And I guess it hit him in the head and killed him instantly.
Yes, and so according to coroners, it was a quarter mile east of Sumas, which is interesting. When they, on our first talk with Alan Saar and Gertie, they talked about Saar Road, and then they had a quarry out on near Vetter Mountain, and they put down these big rocks. So they were blowing a stump or whatever there, and anyway, he was killed. I was thinking that I looked in the archives and I figured, it'd be 2 weeks later when the Bellingham Herald got the information. But no, it was that night. And the reason why it was that night is the telegraph. The railroad had already been through and the telegraph was in. And so the coroner came out that night. And the article was in the Bellingham Herald that next day, that next Monday. He was killed on a Saturday. So Herb is probably right in respect that it was probably a nice sunny day, and the stump got caught up in the sun. He couldn't see it. So
He said it was a rock.
Well, yeah, a rock, according to coroners. That was what the article was in the Bellingham Herald, and that was Monday, August 1st. So why there was a rock out there, I don't know, because unless there was an old Indian fire pit at one time and a tree grew around it, and then when they were blowing it, it could have thrown these rocks up. So that was what the article was in the Bellingham Herald on Monday, August 1st, 1904. This is a picture of the Hatch family in Fallings Rock, West Virginia. Herb, go ahead and explain who is who.
Well, this is my grandfather sitting in the chair, and that's his wife.
Okay, you're pointing to...
You were killed by a falling
His wife,
object.
Cornelia.
Object.
That's my great-grandfather. Great
Today's
is
terminology.
my grandmother. And next to her is my father, Bill Hatch. And This this here is the oldest son, Walter Hatch, and this is their daughter, Nancy. She married at Clearbrook. Then there's Perry Hatch, Frank Hatch, Earl Hatch, and there's David Hatch, the one that was king.
All that has
This is Howard Hatch, Harley Hatch,
That's Harley, and one is
and that's Howard Hatch. And that is my father right there.
he was the youngest in the family.
He was the youngest in the family.
Now they came out from West Virginia.
Yeah, in 1900.
Okay. So that's a picture of your.
That's a picture of my grandfather, Edgar Hatch.
This is a picture of the 1906 area of Clearbrook. And what it shows here, there's no road, no Blaine Sumas Highway, no East Badger. It stopped around about where the high school was. And the road to get to Sumas was basically Van Buren up to Haverstick and then over to Sumas. The Hatches lived right about where that dot is. That's where they bought a homestead. And from this map, then the Clearbrook store would have been in this area, and then the first, this area out here east of the high school was just a big swamp at that time. So
That is the old house my grandfather built. Him and some of his sons built that around an old log cabin. And that old log cabin now is out the Fusion Park, just off of the Badger Road.
Berthisson Park, and it was a house within a house.
Yeah.
And that was, the location of this is where basically Berenson Dairy is right now. And the house sat in the back a little bit, and the barn, they had the barn up closer to the road. Now you have a story too of your grandfather talking about the road. At one time they were going to build a fancy road through there. What did he have to say?
Oh, my dad and his dad was out for a walk, and he was right where the Badger Road goes through there. And my grandfather said to my dad, he said, someday there's going to be a highway through here, one of the finest highways in the state. And that happened to be the Badger Road.
Well, there's a road. I don't know about the finest road in the state. Well, I think the Blaine Sumas, or Sumas Blaine, however you want to say it, was built around 1922 or so. And it was what, 12-foot cement all the way, 2 lanes, 12 foot. So it was actually a pretty good road when it was first built.
Better than anything they had with the old logs.
Right, and gravel. Because in the old days, you can almost imagine the gravel roads, the dust would just fly from them. You could see people for miles, that dust going up, polluting the air. And that's why we got global warming now. These are pictures of the different hatches.
That is Harry Hatch, and then Harry Hatch and his wife, Flora Gillis. She was related to the Gillis family.
Now, Flora was a sister to Beaton,
Yes,
and they owned the homestead that was to the west of you, 160 acres to the west, the Gillises. Okay.
and that is my Uncle Perry. Again, he was quite a violin player.
That's a picture of
That's the beaten gills, that's a sister to,
with the Great Majestic, the stove, the Great Majestic, that according to this was fired up his wood stove in 1904 and never let it go out till he died in 1978. But before we get to where you lived, you were born and you grew up down in Nooksack.
I was born in Nooksack in February 9th, 1922. The house that I was born in was on West 2nd Street, Nooksack. And then we moved from that house to the Gillis Road. We lived there when I was about 2 years old at that time. And then later we moved on the Gillis Road about 2 miles north. And we lived there for a while. It was right on the Sumas River. And I remember my older brother, he passed away. And we used to play on the banks of the Sumas River there. And we'd slide down the hill and get our clothes all dirty. And my mother would haul us out, and she'd change our clothes, and we'd go right back out and start going down the banks again and getting dirty. But anyhow, we moved over to the Badger Road from there on. That was in 1926.
When you were 2 years old, you remember your aunt?
Oh, I remember my aunt came and took my crib for her son who was just born. And I didn't exactly like that very well. But anyway, after we moved from there, we went to the Badger Road. And that's, when I started school at Clearbrook. That was in 1924, 25.
These are just more pictures of the hatches, and your dad is in the lower left one.
That's my dad there, his older brother, Howard Hatch. And then those 3 there are his sons. I can't quite make out the picture.
Which one? This one? There's Lloyd and what? Olive Kirkman. Is that was you from your Aunt Nancy's? She married a Kirkman?
Yeah, right. And then this is my dad and his oldest sister. I forget her name.
Ida.
Ida. Yeah, she married a Nutter.
Did Nutter live where George Glass lived?
Yeah.
Okay, because there's a Nutter buried at the Lakeside Cemetery.
And these 3 up here is his children. And then that's 4 is all of his children. That's my great-grandfather, William Chambers.
He was a Civil War veteran.
Right, yeah.
And he was the father.
I can't make that out.
Well, he was the father.
Oh.
He was the father of. Well, these are actually headstones, and quite a few of them Herb made. A lot of times up at the outside cemetery, you have a lot of unmarked plots, and I marked 80 some over 2 years, and so Herb did the cemetery a big service by making these headstone himself.
Right,
Now, this is where I have a recording. I'm going to try this out, see how this recording works. Herb came over about 7 years ago, and I was walking through the cemetery, and I didn't know all these got these headstones. Well, who are these people? So Herb was one of my best interview people. I've interviewed about 7 different people through the cemetery, and he knew people that no one else knew. So let's try this audio interview. Herb will be speaking.
Lot 22, Crippen. Franklin Crippen. You're related to them how?
Crippen's wife, Esther, was my great aunt, my grandmother's sister. They came from West Virginia.
At the same time, your
About
parents?
the same time.
And where did they live?
Well, in Ohio and West Virginia, Niagara Falls.
How is Chambers related to the Hatches?
My dad's mother, my grandmother, she was the daughter. Cordelia and Hester were sisters, and Roxy Houston.
So Roxy Houston, Hester,
and Cordelia were sisters. And they were all Chambers.
was he the father?
He was the father.
Where is the mother, or did she die? Had she died? Or?
She died. She didn't.
She didn't make it out to the
No.
West?
The Crippens
Had a daughter?
is a daughter of them, and they had a granddaughter that was buried up at the Perry Cemetery.
Wow, that goes back a few years.
Yeah, this is the headstone at Perry Cemetery, and it shows in the bottom right there the infant Brandaberry. And Herb is the only one that would know anybody buried, as far as I know, at Perry Cemetery. And the reason they probably buried her there is that it was still active up until about 1920. The older cemeteries were interesting. Perry Cemetery is up on a hill. The St. Anne Cemetery out here west of Sumas is up on a hillside. In the old days, they built these cemeteries on land that was not very productive or good. If anyone has ever been to the Agassiz Cemetery, you'll see that. It's up on a hillside, and it's land that you can't farm. So that's not quite the case anymore. Lakeside was actually started in about 1899, and it was an orchard at that time. So to give up land for a cemetery was a big deal back then, and it is today. Oh, this is just the hatch lot. So there's there were 3, the Chambers, the Crippens, and the one hatch lots. There's 2 more hatch lots at Lakeside. And lot 72 was Henry Nutter. And then there was Howard and Ragna and Norman. Now, how was Norman related to you?
Norman was the younger son of Howard and Wright. Harold, that's my older brother.
And is that the one that didn't live very long? Only like 7 years old?
Yeah, he was just 7 years old when he passed away. He passed away in 1929.
Okay. Now, we're going to be traveling up towards the school. As you went up the Van Buren Road, you would see an old log house. And the log house was actually on our property, Perry property. But more importantly, there was a log cabin, too, where the hatches were, and they were all built by George Goodwin. George Goodwin on Goodwin Road. If you go down Goodwin Road, you'll see still a log house, the old dovetails. And on that house, they put in windows and stuff. I'm sure they're not original, because the reality of these old houses were that they didn't live in them very long, because they were not the warmest things, and they were dark, and it was cold. On this particular house, they planted black locust. Now, black locust is pretty much native of, I want to say, the Midwest, Ohio. And you can go around to several places around Whatcom County, and if you see black locust kind of growing out in the middle of nowhere, you can almost think that there was an old log house. You'll see one up on Swanson Road. You'll see some black locusts, and here, and there's one down where John Vanderveen lives on Lindsay Road. You'll see black locusts around there, so you can pretty much understand where the old homesteads were. So as we go up further north on Van Buren Road, we come to the railroad tracks. Now, this was the first Clearbrook school, and it was 1884, a log cabin, log house. The difference between a log house and a log cabin. The first picture I showed of the, see if we can get that. This one had shingles on the side, so it was more finished. The log houses didn't have, so looks like a little colder. They had something in there. But this was the first one. And then as the mills came in the 1984 Clearbrook School is about where my pointer is now. And then they moved it a quarter mile to the north, the 1910 Clearbrook School. And we'll get to those pictures later. And that was up on Van Buren Road. Late 1800s, they built a new school. And this was the school that was up there. I've shown people this. There's a house now. That's where the Kirkmans, May and Bob Kirkman used to live, and it's up on the hill just before the tracks. Today you can go and you can see 4 maple trees, and they pretty much delineate where that school was. This is a Google picture of where that school was, and this is Van Buren. This is the railroad tracks, and that school sat up a little bit on that knoll up in here. And then in 1910, they built a new school. That was a quarter mile up the road, and that was the Clearbrook School.
So Howard must have went to school there, is that right?
Milton. Milton would have gone to school in
He went to
that
school
one.
there, and just before they moved it up to where the new school was built.
So this was the 1910 District 13 Clearbrook School.
Yes, I went to school, started there in let's see, I was born in 22, so 1928, I was in first grade there. This was the first and second grade room. This was the third and fourth grade. And this is the fifth and sixth grade. And this one over here was the seventh and eighth. Well, finally, the population of the school was getting lower all the time, so they done away with that room there. And this is the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, and then seventh and eighth up there.
The Clearbrook School was a 1 through 12 until about 1918, and then after that, the 9th through 12th. Then they went down to Nooksack, and then in 1944 was the last year. 43, 44 was the last class at Nooksack. They had consolidation of the school districts. So then see if I have a picture. I might not have a picture of this thing. This was built up near where the Kellys were. One of the first homesteaders up at Clearbrook were the Kellys. Here's a Google picture. The last remnant of the empire. The Kellys used to have about 300 acres in the area, and they had a 3-story house. Supposedly they had hit, John Kelly had hit gold up north and was able to build a 3-story house. And this is the last remnants when they burned the barn, the 1915 barn. I was looking at actually the railroads, the little tramways in the area, and I saw this smoke, so I followed where that smoke led, and that was That was on, I think, May 30th, 2010, I believe. They burned it. And you can see the fire trucks out there. It's a great picture. So, and the school would have been directly west of that. So the school is over here. And actually, the Kellys were instrumental in the beginning of the school district. They donated land and time to build that first school. This is just a picture or two of the hops in the area. Do you remember the Gillises having hops?
No, that was before my time.
Do you remember the hop house or anything at the Gillises?
No.
Well, anyway, hops were big back in the early 1900s. And this is a picture up at the Kellys. And today you can still go out in different places and find still hop plants that have gone wild after all of these years. You actually can see them up on Moe's Hill, too. On the hillside there, there's a lot of hops that grow up there. Yeah, this was to remind me of boxing. Boxing was big back in the 20s, and this was Farmer Kelly. Walter Kelly was a boxer. And you have some experience in boxing.
A little bit. We went to fight against Linden. And they put me up against he was a Golden Glove contender. Well, a few minutes after we got in the ring, everything went black. That was the end of the fight.
This was in your ninth grade, because they were called smokers back then.
Yeah.
How old were you when that happened?
Oh, you've been ninth grade, so you've been like 14, 15. You've been 14 or 15.
Yeah.
Because then, what do we got here? Oh, this is just a view. As he was going to school, he could look up into the hills and enjoy all the different mountains. And this is just a picture of the names of the mountains from the Clearbrook area. Haystack, Sugarloaf, Bear Paw, there's the quarry up there, and Church, West Church, Red Mountain, Black Mountain, and Anderson. You don't see Anderson Lake, but it shows where it is. And then Tick Hill, Moose Hill, Moose Hill. And it's kind of growing up. You can't really see it as well as when we were growing up. This is a picture taken on the steps of the Clearbrook School.
I remember when I was in the first grade, everybody had to line up before school started. Everybody had to line up in a long line. And the principal, he was mean. He was all standing there, and all of a sudden he went down. He grabbed some guy by the shoulders and shook him. I don't know what he had done, but I was afraid of him, like everybody else were.
Who was that principal?
His name was, I forget now.
Cosmos.
Alan was his name.
Now, when you were in the 8th grade, you had my dad as a teacher and principal.
I had to, I went 9 years to the school. I flunked the 5th grade. Me and the teacher didn't get along with each other.
Ron, was that your dad up there in that picture?
Yeah, up on the right-hand side.
And when we graduated, there was just 4 of us. There's 3 girls and me. And
8th grade graduation.
yeah, 8th grade.
Did you get any presents?
No.
Well, it used to be that's all you had to go to school. And when we went to school, 8th grade graduation, you got a little present, like a watch, or I guess now it'd be an iPad or whatever, iPhone. But you got nothing. You got nothing.
No, I got nothing. Just a diploma.
Here's another picture taken on the steps. There's only one
I think
person.
that was Doris's class.
Is it? There's Eugenia Estergreen. I know her.
Is Mom in there?
No, I just went the first, second, and third grade. But those kids, I recognize them.
There's Bill Connell. Bill Connell's in that picture.
You know, we started school together. That probably would have been my class, but I was gone.
I think that's Bill Connell.
Oh, okay. We were in the same class. And some of those other girls, I recognized.
This is a picture, I threw this in, of the 1924 basketball team. My dad is in this picture, and Jan's dad is in that picture. Herman Eden. Herman Eden here, Jan's dad, and my dad. 1924. So basketball was big back then. They look pretty rough. Look at those knee pads. This is a picture of the Nooksack, or the Sumas Nooksack High School. When Clearbrook, when they stopped having only went to 8 grades, and the high school went to Nooksack, they called it the Victory School District until 1932, when they built the Sumas Nooksack High School. I believe that was 1932. It shows in this picture, it's showing the trees that lined it, the school's here, and it showed the slough in the back that went around, and that's Glenn Olson's back in there. And there's no farm here where Herb Kirkman lived, and that, like I say, that slough. And you see these little dots? That was a filbert orchard. 1943, the government flew over and took pictures in 1943 of this whole area. And you can get them, and it's really interesting to look at. Look at all the woods back here, and then that slough is here. Well, they've changed all that because there must be a tile that goes down the high school road, because all this has been eliminated. You don't see any of this anymore.
Well, I can remember when the first day that Doris went to school. Well, halfway up to where we caught the school bus, she dropped her box of crayons all over the floor, over the ground. I helped her pick those up, and when we got to where the bus stopped and picked us up, this was getting on the bus. She dropped her crayons again all over the ground.
Good going, Mom.
Well, of course, I had to pick them up. I had crayons sticking between each fingers and both hands, and trying to hold my lunch pails at the same time. I was a matter of heck. And finally we got on the bus and finally got to school. She had all of her crayons, but
Did you ever walk to school?
oh yeah, when it was first, second, third grade, you had to walk to school when it was halfway decent weather.
Yeah, he turned it off.
And
I don't know what happened then.
when it was real bad, my aunt, my 2 cousins' mother, would take us to school.
How did she take you to school?
They had a bus, didn't they?
Oh, I think, yeah, we had a bus. It was an old, we called it the old jumping box car. And it had a seat down the middle, like an old ironing board. You had to straddle that. And then it had seats around the outside, around the inside perimeter. And they would call it the old bouncing box car. And I think that was the only school bus they had in the Nooksack area. Finally, when I was in the 8th grade, we had a newer bus. And Jack Gillis was the bus driver. Yeah, that was brother to Beaton Gillis.
Now, in ninth grade, after ninth grade, then you went to, they moved to Bellingham?
I went to school the freshman year at the Nooksack Valley High School, or Sumas Nooksack, they called it then. And then I moved to Bellingham in 1938. That was a big change. There were more kids in my sophomore class at high school than there was in the whole school out there at Nooksack.
Now, you had a teacher in Bellingham that knew you, apparently.
I had Rod's aunt, Agnes Perry.
Mary Agnes.
She was my teacher. She was an English teacher.
What's interesting, I was watching the penmanship, or the cursive writing of Herb, and he uses the Rice method of business penmanship. And I'm sure Annie Mary taught that.
Your dad.
And my dad, she got it from Annie Mary because the Rice method of business penmanship came out of Bellingham in about 1920. And you can Google it and still see the little books where we had to practice. And Herb makes the H's, they're a special way in the Rice method, and the R's are a certain way. And you can tell right away. Most people use were taught the Palmer method, but the Rice method was the method of choice taught by Annie Mary and my dad. And then you graduated from Bellingham.
Yes, 1941.
And you got a job right away at...
I went to work I worked for the cannery during the summer vacation. And then after I graduated from high school, I went to work for the Bellingham plywood plant. And I worked there until until I got drafted into the Army.
You got drafted in the Army, and then you were... you ended up in New York, going over to Europe.
I got on the Queen Mary and watched the Statue of Liberty go out of sight. And when we crossed the Atlantic, at that time, it was full of German submarines.
U-boats.
But the Queen Mary was too fast for her. Every 5 minutes they would change course, and they couldn't get a beat on the Queen Mary, so we got to Glasgow, Scotland, without any problem.
The Queen Mary was converted to a troop ship during World War II,
Right.
and it was repainted.
We had about 45,000 or 25,000 troops.
25,000 troops on it, which is true because they would take turns.
Well, they take every excuse me. Where you got to stay inside, would trade with the people that had to sleep out on the open deck. In my company, we didn't have to. For some reason or other, we got to stay inside the whole trip. Every 12 hours they changed some people.
So yeah, and they would do the zigzag course, and apparently it was called the Gray Ghost because it was painted gray, and it was doing the zigzag pattern. And Hitler had put out a bounty on the first person that could sink it. Big bounty too, but they never were able to. It was too
We
fast.
finally got to England, and we took over the whole RAF airport. We had to go in there. We had to clean up the mess hall. It was filthy. Bugs and there were all kind of different bugs that crawl out from behind the cracks. We finally got everything cleaned up and ready to go. We was on a big open cow pasture is what it was. It's level and going. We had P-51 Mustang fighters, and on D-Day, you couldn't see the sky. It was just black with airplanes going over and back and forth. And unload their bombs and everything, and they get that done, and they come back and reload and hit them again. And it took about 2 years before they gave up. We moved over to Belgium for a couple of months during the Battle of the Bulge. And when that was over with, we were scheduled to go home with the first. They changed their mind and they were going to send us to the South Pacific. And in the meantime, they dropped a bomb on Japan and we didn't have to go. So we got to go home.
When you left, you saw the Statue of Liberty, and when you came back,
yeah, it was all in front of the boat. As you can see, barely see the picture. The Queen, the Statue of Liberty. When Bush was way over, I didn't think I'd ever see her again, but I got to see her the second time.
then you came home, and then you went back to work at...
Went back to work at the plywood plant. They made it a law that they had to rehire us back. And we got to...
And then you became, you had an opportunity to work for the Parks Department?
Yeah, after 14 years with the plywood plant, why they decided to close up. There was an opening, 3 openings in the city. So I had to figure out which one I wanted, street or water or parks. So I thought Parks Department would be the best. I worked there for 27 years.
And you were a caretaker at Bayview?
No, I wasn't a caretaker. I was a foreman over the mowing crew. I got to be the foreman, and then later on I got to be the supervisor over the horticulture department. After 27 years, I decided to hang it up. I could make more money retired.
So then a couple years ago, you were interviewed by the Linden Tribune about chambers. If you go to Herb's house, you'll see about an inch thick genealogical booklet of all the history of the hatches and the chambers. At 50 years, you lost your first wife died.
Yeah, she passed away in 1997. And before that, excuse me, I lost my two daughters 9 months apart. And then that was in the 1980s. And I lost my wife, all by myself. So I decided to went out to Sumas, joined the club here, and that's where I met my present wife, Jan.
I understand that Doris was kind of the matchmaker
Yeah.
in that situation, so that worked out good.
I figured I couldn't go wrong with what she said about Jan, so we've been married now 16 years.
I think it's going to last.
It's in a middle class.
And then you moved into a house. You sold your house in Bellingham and moved into a house which is really interesting.
Lived out there on the Gillis Road. I was on the Sumas River. Now in my later years here I am back on the Sumas River.
Back on the Sumas River. He's only had one really bad accident.
Oh yeah, I forget about that. I bought a new Sears Roebuck lawnmower, and I was mowing the backyard. I got into a tight spot that was two levers, forward and reverse. And I thought, well, I better back up a little bit, get out of this close quarters. I hit the wrong pedal. I was supposed to go forward, and I hit the reverse pedal, and in I went. When I come up out of the water, I looked around, and there my lawnmower set was, the two hind wheels were sticking up out of the water. And, so I finally got myself up out of it. It took quite a job of getting up out of that river. And I got up and went in the house. And old Jan, I went to the river. She called her two sons. They come in and helped me get it out. Finally, the old boy was trying to, I took it, after we got her out of the water, I took it up to the shop and took it all apart, cleaned it up, turned the key on the whale latch.
Wow.
After 3 or 4 years, it finally took its toll, and I had to trade it in for another lawnmower. They got me a John Deere. I still got it.
Well, you were
And I
fortunate.
didn't go in the river with it either.
You were fortunate to come out. Not everyone does. Well, Herb, what's the secret to your long life?
The secret to what?
Your long life.
Oh, my wife.
Life.
My wife. Had a lot to do with it. I know when I first got married, she had me a new shop, workshop. I spent a lot of time in it. They were making, whatever anybody wanted me to build, I built it.
So you keep active. That's
Well,
that's the key.
Keeping busy is one reason I'm so old.
Well, you have a wonderful memory. You can remember stuff that no one else can. And when I was interviewing, it was,
A lot of things I haven't told.
well, we can't be here too long.
Well, I can remember the time we lived there on the Gillis Road. We had an old Plymouth Rock hen. And she was, whenever we walked up close to her, she would squat and sit there. So we'd take her by the tail, pull her around and pull her through the dirt. She was plowing.
Yeah, you also remember when you were small, a cabin burning out in the field. The Furnaces cabin.
Oh, yeah. It was an old cabin. It's kind of a log cabin. And I looked out the window and it was to the north or east of us. The whole house was just ablaze. And they were still somebody living in it. The Furnace family. And then there was a northeast wind blowing too. It didn't take long for that to
Was it a log?
with ashes on the ground.
Was it a log cabin or just a shack?
No, it was a two-story house.
Well, Herb, I'd like to thank you for sharing all your memories and your experiences and your experiences at Clearbrook. So let's give Herb a hand.
Okay, part of the Senior Center. We thank you all for being here and hearing a little history about our county here where we all live. So thanks for being here, and thanks to Herb for remembering all this stuff, you know. That's pretty amazing.